Okay.
Okay.
Are we starting?
Good afternoon.
Good
I'm
afternoon.
Stephanie with Sand Hills Sentinel, and today we're going to talk with Mr. Fry. Mr. Fry, can you tell us your full name?
My name is Mark Stephen Fry.
And you have a lot of knowledge about this history in the sports area in Carthage because your brother was in sports, is that right?
That's correct. I had two older brothers, both of them in sports, and both of them I watched as I was growing up as a little boy.
And what did they play?
Well, my older brother played all three sports. I'm not sure that he played baseball, but I know he played basketball and football. And my middle brother played basketball and football, and I believe baseball also.
What year was that?
My older brother graduated from Carthage High School in 1958, and my middle brother graduated in 1964.
So you saw some changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you brought a picture today to
Sure.
show us about these changes. Can you tell us about that?
I sure can. This photograph is is of the 1958 Carthage Bulldogs, and it happens to be the last six-man football team in Carthage High School history. And my brother played on it, as well as Reeves Kelly, Archie Kelly's brother, a fellow named Guy Eanes, Teddy Fry, Robbie Felton, and I mentioned Reeves and Robbie, Teddy Fry, Guy Eanes, Mose Boyette. Those were the six that played on that last team. The next year they went to eight-man football.
Now, what was the reason for upping the mans? What?
You know, now that may be something more of a historian's answer, but I would have to guess because of this, the number of kids to choose from to play on a team. I don't know that, but expanded to eight-man maybe for that reason. And then it was only a couple of years they went to 11-man football. And so I'm not real sure of how it progressed like that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You have a sample of one of the 1959 jackets here beside you. Can you tell us
Yeah.
about that?
Sure. This jacket belonged to my cousin. His name's Jack Phillips, back then known as Jackie Phillips. And he graduated in 1961. And this patch represents the championship team. And that, as you see there, is an eight-man championship, which was 1959, the next year after this 1958 picture I showed you. So the very next year, when they went to 1959, they won this Western North Carolina championship. And Jack Phillips was a really great athlete in Carthage also, and he played, I'm not sure he played baseball, but I know he played basketball and he played football. And his favorite sport was basketball, and he was a standout in both.
Right. Did the basketball team win any championships?
Not to my knowledge. They may have. I can't remember. At the time, I was born in 1952, so at this time I was roughly 8 or 9 years old when I'd watched my brother in 1958, and I have a recollection of him playing basketball, and I can't really remember much about football, so I was only 6 at the time. And then the next couple of years I start recalling a little bit more. So I'm not sure about their championships, but I think I paid more attention to the football teams.
Right,
As a
because
boy,
your brother.
Sure,
Yeah.
and as a boy, we lived, you could almost throw a rock to our home from the high school here. And I would come up to the field when they practiced
Right.
daily, and I would watch them practice and, of course, go to games. And these guys were really my first sports heroes back in the day.
So how much younger are you from your brother who played?
My older brother Bob, back then it was Bobby Fry. Everybody was either Bobby, Robbie, Jackie, Johnny. Now they're Bob, Buck, Rob, that kind of thing. But my older brother Bob Fry is 12 years older than me, and my middle brother Buck is 8 years older than I am.
So they were giants.
Oh
to
yeah,
you.
absolutely.
Yeah, you're living heroes.
Yeah, exactly. And all the other guys too. I can recall vividly watching them practice, and at one time I remembered all their numbers and that kind of thing.
Right.
Because you didn't see much sports on. You saw sports on television, but not that often like you do today. And so I would, had my pro sports heroes, but then these guys I saw them all the time and loved watching them play.
So was it a big family affair, going to the games
Pretty
and
much.
practice? And
Pretty much the games. I don't remember many other kids like me going to the practices, but I can remember being on the field down there. I remember one time back at that time, coaches and the idea was not to let players or athletes drink water during their workouts, which is totally wrong. They learn later. They would have salt tablets and things they would take sometimes, but they did not allow them to really drink much water. And I can remember one of the guys, his name was Tommy Bambauer, and I was up there watching him practice, and he came over to me and he said, "Hey Mark," he handed me a towel, a little towel, a hand towel, and he said, "Go soak this in water and don't let the coach see you doing it," and then hand it back to me. So I did, and I didn't know what he was doing, but I handed it back to him, and when the coach wasn't looking, he would suck the water out of it to get hydrated. But they learned a lot since then, but at the time they discouraged that.
And do you know why? Did they think they would get cramps?
I think they thought it would make them sick. And of course, if they drank too much water, it probably would, but that's probably the reason.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about the yellow shirt behind you.
Oh, yeah, that's a really interesting story. To me, especially, this Carthage High School was green. Their colors were green and white. And back at that time, they didn't. You know, today you play an away game, you wear white jerseys. You play the home game, you wear your colored jerseys. Well, back then they only had money and programs to buy one jersey. And Carthage at that time had the darker, and there were green jerseys with white numbers. There was a high school called Littlefield High School, and Littlefield had the exact same jerseys and colors. And so Guilford College or Elon College, I'm not sure which, and I've asked one of the former players on that team, and they can't remember either, but it was one of the two, donated these uniform jerseys. I guess they got new ones, and they donated them to Carthage. And so when Carthage in 1963, the year 1962-63, and 63-64, when Carthage High School played Littlefield High School, Carthage wore these jerseys. And there's a yearbook that shows them, not colored pictures, but you can tell because they're the lighter color with dark numbers. And so they would wear those so you could distinguish between the two. And then in talking to Jimmy McCaskill, who played on that team with my brother, and he was a great athlete also here in Carthage, but he told me that they wore them another time when it was raining so hard, the field was so soaked, and they got so muddy at halftime, they changed into these jerseys for the second half. And he said it felt good for the first couple of downs, and after that they were soaked. And then finally, one other time, I was told by Bobby Myers, who was one of the greatest players here, that they wore them to a playoff game in Mount Gilead, and this is kind of an interesting story to me anyway. Mm-hmm. It was in 1962, it was 1963, it was November the 22nd, 1963, and that date is the date that John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And so Carthage High School, their coach, decided to let them wear these jerseys as the good luck. Jimmy McCaskill said he would do things like that to fire them up. So they were going to wear them in the playoff game for good luck. I happened to have gone to that game. I was in the fifth grade, and I got to go to that game and ride on. There was an old school bus. It was a school bus, but it was green and white. It was really a Carthage community bus, but the teams used it to travel in. It was old timey back then. We rode on that bus. I got to miss school that day, and went to that game with them. They happened to lose that game, and then they found out later President Kennedy had been assassinated. Well, sort of interesting to me, all through the years, I had in my mind that I was the president of my class. I didn't even remember we had presidents of class that young, but I was the president of my class, and the teacher came in. I wasn't there. Nobody knew why I was absent, but said that our president has been killed. And my friends, my kids thought they meant me. And I thought, well, surely I dreamed that. But I had a friend within the last year confirm that story. That was a true story. So I thought that was always funny.
Yes, that is entertaining.
Yeah, but anyway, this jersey is really, to my knowledge, the only remaining jersey of Carthage High School that exists today. Because in 1964, the year 63-64, after the season, when they were wearing the green and white, they were all boxed up, the jerseys, and put in the office over here where the Carthage High School was to store till the next year. Well, Carthage was through. Union Pines High School began the next year. Well, Carthage High School burned in March the 11th of 1964. and those jerseys burned up in there. But my brother, my middle brother, Buck Fry, tried to find his. He knew they were in there. They were having a play practice over here, a senior play practice. My brother was up here. His girlfriend was in the play, and they heard the crackling fire. He drove up to the Etna station. My understanding it was called an Etna station, called Buck Cook's. Everybody knew it as Buck's. He drove up there to call in the fire. There's no cell phones, of course. And he called it into the fire department, went back and tried to locate his jersey, which was a number 81. Well, he found one, but it happened to be number 18, inside out, which I believe was Jimmy McCaskill's jersey. But anyway, he got that jersey, and somehow that jersey got missing. I don't know how, but the rest of them burned up. But he had this jersey on, and so I kept it all these years. And he said it would be okay to give it to the museum. So to my knowledge, there are no other Carthage High School football jerseys in existence. My older brother had one when he played, but it just kind of rotted away. He said his daughter wore it for years and years and just kind of dry rotted.
Right.
So that's the only one that exists. And people could be confused in the museum if they don't read the story, because they'd say Carthage was green and white. Couldn't be a Carthage jersey, but it in fact is. Maybe one of the first alternate jerseys. You know, they talk about alternate jerseys and alternate uniforms today on sports teams. This was truly one of the first alternate jerseys.
That's a lot of history.
Yeah.
What do you know of any of the players today, what they're doing, if any have stayed in the area?
Well, I know Larry Cadell, who was for many, many years our mayor here in Carthage, and I know he's still here. He still lives in Carthage, and my brother, Buck Fry, lives in the Foxfire area. Most people had to leave, to get jobs.
Right.
The 50s and the 60s in Carthage was a special time. I mean, really, if you talk to anyone that grew up in the 50s and 60s, like I did and like they did, I call it the golden age of Carthage, really, because Carthage, and you can't really explain it to people because you had to live it, the way things were here in Carthage and the atmosphere of the whole thing of growing up. But once time passed a little bit more and you moved towards the 70s, people had to leave here to work, to find work. I was able to stay here because I worked with the local health department for a while, and then I went to work with the state, but I still lived here and drove. But most people had to move away. Oscar Eldridge was another really great football player and athlete, baseball player. He still lives in the area. There are others that don't come to mind right now. I know John McDonald. I don't believe John played, but he's an old Carthage Bulldog, and he's still around. He still lives in Carthage.
Did you ever play sports?
The only thing I played in high school, or the only organized sports I played baseball, Little League and Pony League, but I only played in high school. I was on the first wrestling team at Union Pines, and I was just a lightweight. I was like 115 pounds or whatever, and didn't even really want to play, but my PE coach thought I was pretty good for that weight class, and so he kind of made me be on it. But other than that, I didn't play any organized sports. I was actually I thought too small to play football. I was like 5'7", 115 pounds, and that didn't. Although guys were a lot smaller back then. One thing I've noticed, like about this jersey, and there's a jersey over there, Robbie Felton's jersey from the '58 team. I mean, not jersey, but the jacket, the player's athletic jacket. Those guys were smaller back then than I recall. Of course, I was little, but I've put both of these on, and they both fit me now. Of course, I guess I got filled out some, but they were just smaller. People were smaller back then, I think.
Right.
Now, Jackie Phillips was a big guy anyway, as well as Archie Kelly. They were big and tall back then. That's why they were such good basketball players.
Well, I sure hope you get the chance to give some tours here at the Carthage Museum. This sports room is really full of a lot of rich history.
It is.
And it's a shame that you don't have more organized tours here.
True. I agree with you, and it's a shame that a lot of things have been lost over the years, from those days, at least in my opinion. I mentioned earlier to one of y'all that I used to have, my brother had a helmet, a Carthage High School helmet that was at our house, and somehow it got tossed out, and things like that, and that would be special to hang on to. But this field that's behind me back over here is where I watched them play. I understand earlier there was another field beside the elementary school they started out on. My father would have played there. Well, actually, my father would have played at the old school down on McReynolds Street. Then they played here. Then they moved to the mill, the old Carthage Fabrics mill, because that field had lights. And then they moved back to this when they developed this field behind me down here, and that's the one I recall the most. But they only played there like 4 years. I didn't realize that, until I started thinking about it, from like 1961 through 64, and that was it for the history of this field right behind me here.
And why is that?
Well, Union Pines started in 1965,
Okay.
64, 65, Union Pines High School.
What's on that field now?
The one that the last Carthage team,
Right.
that was donated to the town by the county or by the school for a park. And so there's still a field there. There's a baseball, softball field, the infield, which is exactly like it was when the Carthage High School played on it. The infield is still there. The outfield was the football field.
Right.
And then the steps, there are about 20 steps that go up to the gym that's over here. But that football field is still maintained as a field. They don't play football on it anymore, but they still play softball and baseball there. And then the rest of the park kind of surrounds it. So it's still intact. The old mill field is still there. That's where I played Pony League baseball and Little League baseball on that field. And I didn't remember back in those days that my older brother, had played football on that field. I didn't even know it till years later. But that field is still there. They don't play sports on it anymore, but they do mow it. It's still a field. And then this field that's beside the elementary school is just more of a playground area for children at the school now, but it's still a flat area. They actually had a baseball and a football field there.
That's a lot of history. I appreciate that, Mark.
You're welcome.
And I'm sure everybody who watches you today is going to enjoy learning all about this football history, and that we're covered in it. We have no idea until we talk to one of our people here who grew up with it.
True, that's true.
Yes, we just got to start talking to each other more.
I was glad to talk with you about it, and I always enjoy talking and treasure talking to the guys that played and that I watched growing up, that I admired, and they were always good to me as a little kid. And you never forget people that were good to you when they're older than you.
Right.
A lot of them don't want you hanging around them, but they were always good to me, and I love that. I have great memories. John Fry, I need to mention John. He's a lifelong friend of mine and taught me biology in high school, and I grew up, the first recollection really of Carthage basketball, other than my older brother, in 1958 when he played, and I remember a little bit. John graduated in 1962, and he was a great basketball player.
Is John related to you?
Distantly.
Distant Fry?
He's researched it all, and he showed me, and but we're distant kin.
Okay.
But we're more like brothers. He's like another brother to me. But I can remember as a little tiny boy when the girls were playing in the gym, this very gym that's sitting here now, which was state of the art back then, by the way. It was the largest gym in Moore County, and it was big, state of the art gym. Well, the girls were playing. I'd go watch the basketball teams, and the boys would be playing after them, after their game. And I remember John sitting on the end of the bleachers, and I was running around there, and I can remember like yesterday him saying, "Come over here, boy, come over here." And he grabbed me up and put me on his knee, and it's sweet as could be. That's his personality anyway. And that's my first recollection of him. After that, I knew him all my life. He taught me biology in high school. We used to hunt together. We'd go to Carolina basketball games together. We have many, many talks together. He's written 4 books about different things in Carthage, a lot of the history of Carthage, the railroad history in Carthage. Did much research on that. A story about the police chief that was murdered here back in 1953. He did research on all of that and documented all that. But he's a special guy, a special friend of mine. I didn't want to leave him out because he was a really great basketball player that played with Jackie Phillips and those guys on a really good team. Great
Is he
team.
still around?
Oh, John's still around.
Yeah,
As a matter of fact, he retired from teaching biology at Union Pines after about 47 years of teaching, I believe. I was in his first biology class when I went to Union Pines. He retired, and after about 47 years, I believe, he'd coached girls and boys tennis for all those years and won many conference championships and some state championships on both girls and boys. He still coaches the tennis team, so he's still doing it. He almost looks like he did the day I saw him my first day at Union Pines in my biology class. He's still as fit and trim. Hair's a little grayer, but he's in great shape.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So